So it appears that China is officially going to be added in Enlisted, and although this might be just another event squad, I do think Enlisted is planning something more. This can also go with the French, but I do think China is going to be more optimized, and here are the reasons why. Of course, this video has been made possible for your friends at Discord. If you haven't liked, subscribe, or joined the Discord, I highly suggest that you do, but that said, let's get started. For one, Japan is one of the factions in which Enlisted is caring the least about, and it does kind of make sense. The maps that Japan has is pretty much lackluster, and to be honest, the maps are pretty horrific if you ask some people, and for me, they're just not fun to play. On the other hand, adding China, which is a great idea, should help Japan out because China, it is officially said, that is going to be only fighting against Japan, which if you ask me is a great idea. The voice lines that China has been given are the voice lines for only the soldiers. Essentially not the narration, but the soldiers. That is what some people have been arguing over for the last few days since the release of my last video. But it is confirmed that China is going to be essentially a faction, and is also, from what I've been told, it is essentially going to be fighting against Japan, which is great if you ask me. I do not want to be seeing Chinese troops fight against the Soviets or Chinese troops fighting against the Germans because, well, let's just say both of them were the providers to the Chinese at one time. Also the United States, of course, and the British. And pretty much every weapon that China has is essentially from a certain Western power, so that's great. That said, what I do like to see in China is that I do think China should be its own faction. It only makes the most sense if the only option for China is to fight against Japan. I think that's a great idea, and I do think Japan needs some more spotlight. Because as of right now, Japan really doesn't have any spotlight, except for some bad maps and are fighting against the Americans. That said, I think Enlisted should give us a lot of Chinese maps. There are hundreds of maps for like Wuhan, Shanghai, the list just can go on. And I already have an entire video about the tech tree for China, a potential tech tree, because from what I've seen, Enlisted could add something very wonky. Finally, on the other hand, I do think China is a great addition for Japan and for the Enlisted community. Why? For Japan, once again, more maps, more players to fight against, which is great. And not a lot of games have Sino-Japanese War, so that's also great. And of course, the main thing that we are potentially going to be getting is a lot of Chinese players from, well, the Asia region, which is great, because if you didn't look at a map, China has a lot of people who play online games, and I can tell you from a personal account that I've been in China during the summer, and there are a lot of people who play games, and a lot of people who are wanting to play any war games with their faction included, so that's great. That said, it is my personal opinion that Enlisted should add China, but before they do that, they have to add three things. 1. The British as their own faction. Number 2, the Italians as their own faction. All of these, there are no specific order. After that, you have to add the French. Once again, it doesn't have to go up all the way until BR5, but as of right now, you can just make it go all the way up to BR2 or even BR3 if that's what they want for the French faction. Me personally, I honestly just want to have France in game, and although you already have the quote-unquote French resistance squads, I think Enlisted should do more because they have the voice lines for France. Same thing goes for China. If Enlisted ever decides to add China as a one-off squad, which I highly don't think that can be possible, because if you put it in the United States, then it will also be fighting against Germany, but if you also put it in the Soviet tech tree, it can also be fighting only against Germany as of right now, or Japan. So it's, where do you put it? Because you really can't put it with the Japanese, because they're fighting against the Japanese, so that's great. To recap, I do think Enlisted should do more with both France and China, because, well, they have the resources for it, and I think it's a great idea, so that's great. Overall, this is what I think they should do for China. Watch my Chinese tech tree video if you haven't watched it already. And without further ado, have a great day, guys, and I'm pretty excited for the future of Enlisted.